The first sound was the creak of the shed duren old, weathered groan that didn't belong in the middle of a Wednesday afternoon. I'd been in the kitchen pouring coffee when it reached my ears, low but sharp, followed by the unmistakable scrape of boots on the wooden floor inside. The shed sat at the back of my rural property, a small but sturdy structure my grandfather had built decades ago. It wasn't just for storage. It held tools, personal gear, and things that had no business in anyone else's hands. And this wasn't a neighborhood where people just wandered in. I eased to the back window, peering down the property line, and that's when I saw her, Karen. The local busybody, self-proclaimed HOA enforcer despite the fact that our area didn't have an HOA at all. Her round figure was framed in the doorway of my shed, her floral cardigan swaying in the wind, and her face twisted into the kind of smug satisfaction you only see on people who truly believe rules bend to them. But the thing she didn't know, the thing that made the hair rise on the back of my neck with a kind of grim anticipation, was that my uncle was inside. Uncle Ray wasn't just family. He was a seasoned hunter, a man who could move silently through a forest and hit a target at 50 yards without breaking a sweat. He also happened to be visiting for the week, using the shed as a quiet spot to tune his bow and sort his gear. And if there was one thing Uncle Ray didn't tolerate, it was trespassers. From my vantage point, I could see the slow shift in Karen's expression as her eyes darted around the shed, searching through boxes, touching items like she was inspecting them for a yard sale. Her lips moved as if she was reading something off a list. Then, faint but distinct, I heard her mutter, "These'll have to gone in compliant structures can't store hazardous tools." She was talking to herself, but she said it with the authority of someone signing a warrant. Inside, Uncle Ray was still and silent for a long moment. Then he stepped into view. The way he moved made Karen freeze mid-step, broad shoulders, camo jacket, the smooth curve of his bow in hand. A small action camera blinked steadily from its mount on his chest. "You lost?" he asked, voice calm but carrying that weight hunters get from years of tracking prey. Karen jolted, then straightened, trying to recover. "I'm here on HOA business," she said, as if that explained everything. "This shed violates exterior storage codes, and I'm authorized to inspect and document." Uncle Ray tilted his head slightly, his eyes narrowing. "There's no HOA here," he replied. "And even if there was, you don't walk onto someone's land without permission. That's called trespassing." She scoffed, taking a step closer to him instead of backing down. "I have every right your niece's property falls under my jurisdiction. I'm here to protect community standards." Ray's grip on his bow didn't tighten, but he shifted it just enough to make the message clear. This wasn't a conversation she was going to win with bluster. "Lady," he said, voice dropping lower, "this shed is on private land. You've got about 30 seconds to explain yourself before I call the sheriff, and this camera," he tapped the blinking lens on his chest, "is going to show them exactly what you're doing here." Karen hesitated, her eyes flicking to the bow, then to the camera. "You're threatening me," she snapped, but her voice wavered. "That's a weapon." Uncle Ray didn't flinch. "It's a tool and it's legal. You're the one breaking the law." That was when I decided to walk down there. By the time I reached the shed, the tension was so thick it felt like the air had weight. Karen turned to me, her face flushing deep red. "Good you're here," she said, her tone snapping into faux authority. "Tell him to stand down and let me finish my inspection before I fine you for noncompliance." I almost laughed. "Fine me? For my own shed? On my own property?" I stepped beside Ray, my phone out now, camera rolling. "You're on video too, and unless you can show me a signed court order or police badge, you're leaving right now." Her jaw worked like she was chewing on her next lie. "I don't need a court order. My authority doesn't exist." Ray cut in. His voice was quiet, but the edge in it made her blink. "You've been trespassing on people's land, poking into their property, pretending you're the law. That ends today." She tried one more time to bluff her way out, pointing toward the boxes in the corner. "Those tools are dangerous. They're a safety hazard. The only hazard here is you," I interrupted. "And you've been caught in the act." Before she could respond, another voice rang out from the tree line. Need a hand, Ray? It was our neighbor Sam, former game warden, carrying a radio and a digital camera slung around his neck. He'd been walking the property line and had caught sight of Karen heading toward the shed. Sam raised his camera, snapped a photo, and smiled grimly. Got her braking and entering. Sheriff's on his way. The color drained from Karen's face. Her eyes darted between the three of us two men with decades of field experience and me with my phone aimed steady at her, and for the first time, she seemed to understand she wasn't getting out of this with her fake title intact. Karen's lips parted, searching for words, but the crunch of tires on gravel silenced whatever bluff she was about to throw. The sheriff's truck rolled up slow, dust trailing behind, and when the door swung open, Sheriff Mark Davidson stepped out. He wasn't a man you could mistake for anyone else. Tall, built like an oak, with the kind of calm presence that made grown men think twice before lying to him. "Afternoon, folks," he said, his gaze moving from me to Ray, then fixing on Karen. "You want to tell me why you're inside someone else's shed?" Karen straightened like she was addressing a subordinate. "Sheriff, thank goodness you're here. I'm conducting an authorized inspection on behalf of the HOA. This shed is a violation, unsafe, unapproved, and I was just in the process of documenting it for enforcement." Davidson didn't blink. "There's no HOA here," he said plainly. "Never has been. And even if there was, you'd need written permission or a court order to enter private property. Do you have either of those?" Karen stammered, flipping through the papers on her clipboard as if one might magically appear. "Well, if this is..." Sam stepped forward, holding up his own camera. "Got her breaking the latch on the door before she walked in. Clear as day." He turned the display toward the sheriff, who took one long look and then glanced at Ray's chest camera. "You got footage too?" Ray nodded. "From the second she opened the door." Karen's eyes darted between them, panic creeping in now. "This is harassment. They're all ganging up on me because I'm doing my job." Davidson's voice stayed even, but it had that weight to it. "Your job? I'm going to need you to explain exactly who employs you and what authority you think you have here." That was when her story began to unravel. She claimed she was appointed by a community standards board, but when pressed for names, dates, or any paperwork proving such a board existed, all she had were vague answers and a printed packet of bylaws that looked like they'd been typed in Microsoft Word last night. The sheriff turned a few pages, then shook his head. "These aren't legal documents. They're just rules you made up." Karen's mouth opened and closed like she wanted to argue, but Sam's voice cut in before she could. "She's been doing this all over the county," he said. "Had complaints from the Watson farm last month, same story. Claims HOA authority, tries to inspect buildings, makes threats about fines. Folks are too polite to call her out, but she's been building a pattern." The sheriff's radio crackled, and a deputy's voice came through. "We've got a report from dispatch, possible connection between your location and an ongoing fraud case. Similar suspect description." Karen's face went pale. She clutched her clipboard like it was a shield. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said weakly. Davidson's tone hardened. "You're under investigation for trespassing and attempted burglary. You can explain the rest down at the station." He motioned for her to turn around. The moment the cuffs clicked around her wrists, she exploded. "You can't do this to me. I'm protecting the community. You people don't appreciate what I'm trying to do." Her voice climbed higher, shrill and desperate, but the sheriff just guided her toward the truck. The two deputies who'd arrived as backup kept a watchful eye on Ray's footage and Sam's photos. Within days, the story was everywhere. Local news stations ran the headline: "Woman posing as HOA officer arrested in shed break-in." They showed stills from Ray's chest cam. Karen inside the shed, mid-step, clipboard in hand, with the bowstring in the foreground. Online, the footage went viral, drawing hundreds of comments from people who'd seen her in other neighborhoods. It turned out Karen had been running a low-level but persistent scam for months. She'd target rural or unincorporated areas with no HOAs, claim she was there to enforce community standards, and use that bluff to snoop around people's property. If she found something she could label a violation, she'd threaten to fine them, usually for a few $100s. offering to settle on the spot for a smaller cash payment. In some cases, like ours, she didn't even wait for the homeowner to be present. She just let herself in, snapping photos of whatever she thought could give her leverage. But with the footage from Ray, Sam's photos, and the sheriff's investigation tying her to multiple similar incidents, her little empire fell apart in weeks. The county prosecutor filed charges for criminal trespass, attempted burglary, impersonation, and fraud. Witnesses lined up farmers, homeowners, retirees, all with their own stories. And every single one had proof, thanks to the way people started recording her the moment she showed up. At trial, her lawyer tried to spin it as a misunderstanding, claiming she believed she had been granted authority through a neighborhood coalition. But under cross-examination, Karen had to admit that coalition was just her and two acquaintances, neither of whom were willing to testify. The judge's expression said it all, patience gone, tolerance evaporated. The verdict came back fast, guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to 18 months in county jail, followed by probation, and ordered to pay restitution to every victim. More than that, the judge imposed a restraining order banning her from setting foot on any property she didn't own without explicit written permission. But the best part wasn't the sentence. It was what happened after. Inspired by the incident, the county passed new regulations requiring anyone claiming to represent a homeowners association, compliance agency, or inspection authority to register with the clerk's office and carry verifiable identification. And they named it after my uncle Ray's rule. The change was immediate. No more fake inspectors. No more clipboard-wielding busybodies showing up uninvited. People felt safer. Neighbors who'd been keeping their heads down started talking again, organizing legitimate community meetings instead of living under the shadow of one pushy fraud. One evening, after the dust had settled, I found Ray back in the shed, stringing his bow in the same quiet way he had the day Karen walked in. I asked him if he'd known she'd fall apart so quickly. He smiled just a little. People like that, they live on borrowed authority, he said. Take it away, and they've got nothing left but noise. And he was right. The moment Karen walked into that shed with her clipboard and her fake title, she started writing the last chapter of her story. We just made sure it was recorded from start to finish. So here's my question: was it overkill to have 3 people, 2 cameras, and a bow standing between her and her scam? Or was it exactly the kind of stand that keeps someone like her from knocking on the next door? I know where I stand. What about you?